With your help, we can continue to fight for freedom, reach new audiences, and bring important information to the public free of charge. This is not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today, telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
Welcome back to The World Today and the Protagonists. Now, there's a lot of talk about data centres, and there should be more. What exactly are data centres or data centres? Now, they're secure, centralised physical facilities that house critical computing infrastructure, including servers, data storage drives, and networking equipment. They are designed to process, store, manage, and disseminate large volumes of data, serving as the backbone for modern digital services, such as cloud computing, websites, and applications for huge technology companies. They're a gold mine for those companies investing into these data centres. Now, there's a major concern amongst thinking Australians that the mega data centres planned and under construction right now in Australia will draw heavily on our already precarious energy and water supplies. Now, sure, there's billions being injected into these very large mammoth data centres, some of which Australian taxpayers will contribute to. Now, we'll talk about the size and location of these projects later with our panel. But do Australians know what the deals are that our governments are signing us up to? A bit like the COVID thing. We'll buy all that poison basically, that vaccine, and then, well, we're not going to use it, but we spent billions and billions. And if you look at some of the countries in Europe, they're now having trouble because they actually signed a particular amount of money spent for the vaccine. So are we going to do the same? What if imagine this, the whole AI sector suffers a major crash because the returns on investments don't stand up. Governments are also failing to spell out how the massive use of energy and water resources will be accommodated. Should we not be closing down our power generation facilities? And what about the need for additional energy, which American-owned data centres are already investing in, such as nuclear power stations, small ones? Shouldn't these companies be providing their own power and water supplies? No, we're going to have windmills. We're going to put solar panels. Why aren't we already investing? Makes sense. We've got the uranium in nuclear power generation. We'll talk to our panel about some of these unanswered questions. Our panel, again, friends of the World Today, Robbie Barwick, Director of Australian Citizens Party, I got this right? I can't believe it. Yeah, I cannot believe it. I have practiced your name all day, and guess what? Paul Vallejo. He's an ex-NASA aerospace, avionics, and nuclear engineer. Ross Johns is president of the Wimmera Mallee Environmental and Agricultural Protection Association. Thank you for joining me. First of all, Robbie, you see governments, they're so excited about these data centres, so excited. But they're not telling us the full story. And if you look at the energy, just say for example, forget all the windmills and power, from those windmills and solar panels. Look at the water, for example. Where are they going to get these natural resources, such as water, to keep these data centres at a reasonable temperature? You should try your microphone. It's that little button that says on. There we go.
Sorry,
right.
Mike. To answer the last question first.
Yes, you can.
I don't know where they're going to get the water from. But I can comment on the enthusiasm of governments for data centres. I think this is a hallmark of governments that I've seen ever since we went down the path of the World Wide Web and the information superhighway, etc. It's every new phase of the technology that comes along, all you get from governments is just manic, unbridled enthusiasm. They madly embrace every aspect of the new technology and uh, bugger the consequences, right? And see, and this happens every single time. And often, what happens, like we've seen before, and we're seeing it repeated now, there's a bubble. A bubble builds in these things. The government enthusiasm actually injects capital and air into the bubble. Everyone goes crazy, laying out all the infrastructure, etc., for this new technology that we've all got to embrace. It's so wonderful now. It's AI. There's no critical. There just never seems to be any critical thinking involved, and then it all comes crashing down. But the damage is done, right? The businesses are bankrupt. The natural landscape is deformed to build the infrastructure, etc. And you think, man, when are you governments going to learn? Having been in this political game for over 30 years now, I've seen it from the beginning, and it never ceases to amaze me just how uncritically governments are keen to embrace every new fad that comes along. And to them, it is a fad. Now, there's something substantial about data centers and AI, etc. There's a real world application for it all, but it's not. It doesn't justify the hysterical enthusiasm you get from governments, which then has a pretty significant real world impact.
Paul Vallejo. See, I told you.
Yeah, there you go.
The mental block. It's just like, duh. But you know more than probably all of us in this room put together. Do you think this government, and they're not alone, other governments are doing the same? Do you think they've thought, that's a good idea, we can make a lot of money from this, without sort of working out that you need energy? Now, we haven't got enough energy at the moment in Australia. We have the resources. We've got the coal and we've got the uranium. But we'll ship that overseas. But even overseas, I think China's going to build some of their data centers below the ocean. I don't know what that will do to the environment down there, but it can't be all that great. But it needs to be cooled. So do you think the governments have gone into this thinking, oh, fantastic, we can make a lot of money out of this, and we look like we're doing something, and they are. But on the other hand, it's just destroying the environment and could quite possibly destroy that country.
It absolutely makes no sense to chase this fad. If you think about who has a competitive advantage in what it would take to build data centers, you need abundant, reliable energy. You need a cool environment, because the cooler your environment is, the less you have to cool these data centers. You also need cheap available land and abundant excess water. And none of those things apply to New South Wales or much of Australia. It doesn't make sense to chase this particular fad, particularly because everything is a trade-off. If you take a lot of energy to put to data centers, that means power prices go up, like they did in Oregon after they built data centers there. Power prices went up 50% over 5 years. And then our chokehold on the cost of living and on manufacturing only accelerates. What we really need to do, we really should focus on the big picture. What's good for Australia, and is this particular plan good for Australia? No, it's not.
Ross, from the farmer's point of view, the rush for rare earth minerals and the data centers being plonked all over the place, along with the wind turbines and solar panels that are destroying magnificent country, along with decimating the farming community. What's your views on these data centers? Do you think government thought, what a good idea, but they haven't done a whole lot of planning, and maybe that extra glass of red shouldn't have been consumed when they made their decisions? If you'd like to turn your microphone on too, that would go really well. No, we still haven't got that. So we'll.
Sorry about the teething problems this time, Mike.
Yes, we do have that at the moment. We can't hear you, Ross. So we'll come back to Robbie. Robbie, what do you think in answer to that question?
Yeah, well, I do know. The government has at all levels a commitment to renewables, and so the two issues are going hand in hand because we don't have enough energy for data centers, and so you're getting all this renewables rollout. And the way it's being done in Australia is taking away the valuable land that we could be using for farm production, etc. I'm sure Ross will say a lot more about that. And so they're creating another problem. Now, I just want to point out, I recently went to China, Mike, as you know, I've talked about this. I spent 20 days in China and got to see it for the first time. And I found something interesting when I was paying more attention to China as a result of my trip, because China is very big on AI, like everyone else is. But they seem to be having a very focused, practical application for AI, and the contrast with the United States shows up in the investment, the level of investment in data centers, because the figures I've seen is by 2027 the US will have invested something like $700 billion in building data centers, whereas China will have invested about $80 billion. And there seems to be, now, I don't want to generalize too much, but there seems to be much more of a focus of AI that helps to run factories more efficiently, etc., rather than AI that's all about, making revenge porn, driving social media silliness, all this kind of stuff that we get bombarded with at the time. Because every time I see a new AI image on social media, I think that's got to be saved somewhere. or a lot of energy was used in generating that, right? But the discrepancy in the level of investment shows you just how much of a bubble the United States has, and unfortunately, Australia tends to follow along on that side of things. And so I'm sure we're influenced by the bubble in the United States, and like I said before, it's going to drive all this investment in the AI data centers and in the renewables that our government will say, see, these are clean and green data centers because it's all done by renewables, but it will do permanent damage to the landscape to build the damn things. And then one other quick point is, I only just was informed about this recently. The town of Morwell here in Victoria in the Latrobe Valley, that's a town where the power station was closed down. That's the big project for Morwell. They're going to build a data center where there is no power. There used to be a power station there. There is no power station now. They're going to have a data center instead. So they're going to be creating a lot more demand for electricity, and then have to solve the problem about where it's going to come from, whereas they used to have a pretty good power station there. So everything about this, certainly the government role in it, just seems silly to me.
Can I ask you, Paul, these data centres in Australia, if they're going along the way we are at the moment, don't like nuke, don't like coal, will they ever become sustainable?
No, data centers need reliable and base load power. They can't deal with intermittent spikes in power that you get from the so-called renewables, which are not renewable. I've never seen a wind turbine fall to the ground and grow another wind turbine. That's not how that works. They're not really renewable. And so no, what you need is very high levels of base load power, which you can only get from things like coal or nuclear. And there's a huge trade-off. What a country needs in order to succeed is plenty of reliable, safe, and inexpensive energy. And what we're building is non-reliable, environmentally damaging, and expensive power. And we're completely going the wrong way. And then if we take our limited resources to devote to data centers, that even just compounds the problem. So there's nothing about this that makes sense. If you were going to do something like this, the very first thing you do is build more installed capacity, build nuclear, and that's what companies are doing. Like, this is one of those things that really drives me a bit mad, is that we say that we can't use nuclear power, but not just governments, but companies are doing it. Microsoft, Oracle, AI, even the U.S. Army is now admitting, we can't count on the power grid reliability. So they started just this year the Janus program, where they have modular reactors that they're going to roll out to their battlefield operations or to their bases. So they don't have to rely on the grid, which is becoming increasingly unreliable due to wind and solar.
Robbie, makes a lot of sense. But we have this we don't like, even though we ship it out and make a stack of money on it, we don't like nuclear power or coal. How do we reverse our mindset? And governments think, the governments, the people think governments are doing the right thing because they're saving our planet, but in fact they're not doing a whole lot, and they're destroying the country. How do we reverse that mindset with the public and with the governments?
Hard nut to crack. I can detect an accent in Paul there, and he clearly knows his stuff on nuclear power. But it sounds like you live in Australia, Paul.
Yes.
And you probably have discovered that when it comes to this issue of nuclear energy, we are a hard nut to crack. There was some kind of number done on our country decades ago. I personally think that it was nuclear power and nuclear weapons were successfully conflated in the 60s and the 70s in this country. And there's an aging generation that really became entrenched anti-nuclear warriors long enough to get those laws passed in the 90s that put a ban on it. And if those laws hadn't been passed, I'm sure with the shift, you can see a shift coming. Even the fact the Liberals took nuclear power to the last election um, is an example of that shift. But it's got this roadblock, which is these laws. If those laws weren't there, I'm sure we would have had some investment in nuclear power by now. But you've got these laws, and so it's a big ask to actually change them. My party, the Citizens Party, we have been advocating for nuclear power longer than anybody. We advocated for it way back in the 90s when no major party would touch it. What we found was, and you see it reflected now, I saw a sign, show me someone who doesn't like nuclear power and I'll show you someone who doesn't know how it works. And that's the thing. It is true. If you can educate people on the mechanics of nuclear power, how a nuclear reactor works, how the nuclear chain reaction works, and therefore how the safety systems work, then what you can do is demystify it and remove the fear element from it. But we've been able to successfully do that as a party over many years, sort of on a one-on-one basis. But when it becomes a political question, it's very, very easy for the naysayers to run a fear campaign. And an example of that was in the last election, and I have to congratulate Albanese. He came up with a killer line to ridicule the Liberal Party's nuclear policy, and it's a very clever line. And so I'm going to repeat it, and with my compliments. And the line was, drawing on Ben Chifley's Light on the Hill speech, Albanese said to Peter Dutton, he said, "We are the light on the hill. You want us to glow in the dark." Now, that's a great line, but that's the best Labor had to offer. They actually couldn't debate substantially. They can't debate the content. They were just able to successfully fight from that standpoint, right? Go
It's
ahead.
completely unfair, like you're saying, to have that line. The nuclear power industry has changed a lot over the decades. The Fukushima, Chernobyl, those are 1960s designs. What we have today is far more efficient plants, and we have what they call passive safety. The importance of passive safety is really critical because, as we know, the electric grid can actually fail and have intermittent power. And if you have a passive safety system, it means just like passive safety, an example of that is if you have a dam. Before the water level ever rises and overtops the dam, you have a spillway that the water automatically goes around the dam and the spillway and stays safe. Modern nuclear designs have passive safety designs that no external person intervention, nothing external has to happen for it to automatically safe itself. So there's a fundamental safety feature in modern designs, which is passive safety, and they cannot melt down.
Ross, you're back again. Thank you very much for getting that fixed. And I see you're next to a water
Yes, I
behind
am.
you.
Yep.
You need a Barbie, I think.
This is the Wimmera River behind me, by the way, in the Wimmera through Horsham, and water is a critical factor. And you were talking about mineral sands before. Mineral sands requires a lot of water to be mined, and I think the the whole water policy in Australia has got to be really considered wisely.
But what about the data centres? You would have missed a fair whack of the fair amount of the conversation, but they do need a lot of energy and water. At the moment, Victoria has just been going through a drought, so not a whole lot of water there. And then for energy, we haven't got enough coal-powered power stations anymore, and we haven't got, the windmills aren't going to do much, and the solar's not doing a whole lot. Best bet is to mine the uranium and keep it within the country and build a couple of nuclear power stations, which is very, very clean energy and it's very, very safe. How do you think that would go down in the bush? I think that would be welcomed open arms, wouldn't it?
Well, we certainly do mine uranium in Australia, and we export it to China along with our coal and gas, and they can use all of our resources. But unfortunately, in Australia, we've got this phobia about using our own resources for our personal benefit, and I think the Americans have got it right. Their big data centres are powered by nuclear reactors. No need for transmission lines. They put the nuclear reactor right where the AI data centres are, and I think we're going to be left behind if we don't adopt best world practice.
Yeah, I totally agree. Robbie, what do we do? I don't know what to do. I think if we keep going ahead, and there's a couple of, there's a 10 billion one called by Keppel Limited in Hazelwood, Victoria. $10 billion, a 720 megawatt data centre is planned for a 123 hectare site near Morwell. Then we have, there's another one here, $10 billion in Western Sydney, sorry, $7 billion. They're going to build a next generation data centre in Western Sydney, largest in the Southern Hemisphere. It's looking like I'll replace a letter with a word here. In the word, it's looking like a cluster duck, isn't it?
Yep. What can we do? Well, I advocate we learn from history, but we're not very good at that. And what I mean by that is just, pay attention to when something's a bubble. Now, to be honest, I don't know much about all these companies in Australia that are building data centers, but certainly the US figures about AI, because AI is the big driver for data centers. The US figures about AI show a real bubble, right? I think Nvidia is the amount of money Nvidia is investing in open AI is using to buy chips from Nvidia, because open AI doesn't make any money. And so when you're at that stage, you're going to run out of money at a certain point, unless Donald Trump's new Fed chairman is going to conjure up a whole heap more, but then you're going to have other economic problems on the back of that. And so it's incumbent on governments to say, okay, what's the application for these data centers? What's the real demand as opposed to the speculative demand? And then what can we do to, if whatever we need in terms of data centers? Well, what can we do? You can't just do it on a wing and a prayer. There's obviously a lot of planning involved, right? Including with new infrastructure. Now, given that we've used security concerns, which I officially reject the security concerns, but we have used security concerns to justify actually embracing nuclear power in Australia. We have now legalized nuclear power, as long as they're floating around in sealed tubs in the ocean, called submarines. We're all for nuclear power now. We've even passed a law to allow us to bury the waste in the desert. So we've come up with a rationale to change the nuclear policy in that area. Maybe that can be the precedent, Mike, for saying, okay, if these data centers are such an overwhelming need, well, you've got small modular reactors and medium-sized modular reactors. We could buy any number of models of them off the shelf from countries around the world that make these things, Korea and China and Russia and whatever. Let's have a project. Well, let's actually have nuclear power data centers, right? Contained something that looks like something about the size of a submarine, but on land, right? Look after them that way. There's thinking outside the box. I doubt you're going to get it though.
I don't think so. They'll put you in the box.
Yeah.
Paul, what do you think? I mean, and if you can clear something up for me, it says they're building a $7 billion. There's a $7 billion partnership to build a next generation data centre in Western Sydney. Question one: what is a next generation data centre? Question two: what will it do to that local community, the environment close by?
Yeah, I think that's one of the key things. I like to dovetail off of that idea of security, because security is a really key thing. And the question is, are we doing the right thing for our security? The very first part of security that we have is we have a massive cost of living crisis. And our energy, high cost of energy underlies a lot of that. So, one of the first things that we should do is get in on expanding our cheap generation. We're shipping off twice as much coal as we need to Asia as we need to power our own grids that we could do cheaply and reliably. We could build no new nuclear power plants here to bring the cost of living down and bring the cost of power down. Then we could get back manufacturing. That's another key piece of security, because we don't produce any of the things that we need for our life. We don't produce our any antibiotics. We don't have a very long supply of petrol in case there is a global conflict. If you've noticed, if you look around the world, it's not like things are getting any real calmer. And if you think about all the things that we rely on from overseas, it would be much better if we made our own power, using our own resources, build more things here, bring down the cost of living, and actually create security rather than rushing off. And I agree with Robert about this bubble, this fad chasing. It's ridiculous. It's childish. It is not true leadership. It's a disaster.
While you're here, I'll keep this with you because I'm not being mean to you, Robbie, but I want to ask him something about RAM and memory. And
Yes, Grandpa.
and Paul, he looks much smarter than you. Anyway, sorry about that. Paul, the other thing that's come out of the woodwork is that RAM or memory, it's just not available. Now that will affect all other domestic and and not so domestic computers. It will affect the automobiles and basically the whole of the working machinery that keeps this planet going. Without memory and RAM, they're not going to be working all that well, and it means that this bottleneck of demand for RAM and memory, it could create just a dreadful scenario for the 21st century.
Is it to me or to Robert?
To you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there are all kinds of things that we rely on, critical materials we rely on from overseas. And yeah, RAM is among them. That's one of the main reasons about the concerns about Taiwan, is if there is a geopolitical event, if there is an invasion of Taiwan, most of the chips are built there. And I think the United States is strategically trying to highly encourage the building of chip factories in the U.S. Again, it goes back to reliability, and RAM is one among them. But there are all kinds of things that we rely on, critical things that we rely on from overseas. And if we were going to act like adults, we would first create more power and then start reshoring some of those things in a strategic fashion, including lowering the reliance we have for things along the lines of computing. In my view.
You said a terrible thing, and you'll be getting a letter from Albanese within days that you said if we act like adults.
I think that was being kind. So I think he should send me a letter of thanks.
It's dreadful. Robbie, what about the financial arrangements that we're not party to because, well, the non-disclosures have been signed and it's all a bit secret? And I'm not going to say they're an abomination because they are. You can really move forward as a civilization, but you've got to have the resources. And the abomination part would be if they destroyed, the country they're supposedly making into a greater country. What do you think about the non-transparent or the non-transparency of the financials?
Well, the Citizens Party has a long-standing view on this. We're actually advocates for government taking a fair amount of responsibility in the economy. We're actually big fans of Alexander Hamilton and what was called the American system. And interestingly, for the nerds, Donald Trump's trade representative gave a pretty good speech on Alexander Hamilton at Davos last week. But Hamilton came up with the idea of a national bank, and that the government should play a role in supporting strategic industries and building infrastructure, which they called internal improvements. And essentially, the success of Western economies for 200 years was based on that. Australia really did it well with the Commonwealth Bank, long-term investments in infrastructure, infrastructure creates the preconditions for businesses and industries to succeed, but also using an investment vehicle to support and through investment industries that you want. We got rid of all that. We privatized it all. That government role changed, and what it changed to is something that is, to me, very suspicious. It changed to this more arrangement where governments are in business with private companies, and they use that business relationship to keep everything commercially in confidence. And so you can't find out a damn thing about these arrangements that our governments get up to with these businesses, where they end up subsidizing them, not investing in them and getting a return that can go back to the bank and then investing in something else like we used to do, but subsidizing them, but in a very confidential way, and it's not transparent at all. So I would prefer that we go back to the old way, where and one of the things our party advocates is we should never have gone down the privatization path of electricity. Because before we did that, all electricity in Australia for a century was government managed, and governments actually had to have some competency and do stuff, and they did it. And we had the best electricity system in the world and the cheapest electricity in the world. But then we went before a lot of people nowadays like to blame renewables for the energy chaos, and it's true. There's a lot of the renewable stuff has created all this driven energy prices. But privatization came first and started that whole process, because now you've got all these companies all wanting to make a cut out of our misery. And it is our misery. Australians are Paul's described it well, our economy is being destroyed by high energy prices, right? And so we think government should go back to being transparent, do what it should be responsible for in the economy in a transparent way. And I think, based on our history, go back to government running energy. And being accountable for that, and then if these new technologies in energy renewables are so great, let the engineers decide that. Let the engineers pick between a nuclear power station or a solar farm. What serves the grid best? Because I reckon if it was an engineering decision rather than a financial decision based on who's the biggest lobbyist of the government, right, you'd have a lot more nuclear power by now and probably a lot fewer solar farms.
Can I echo one thing that I loved hearing, and I'm in violent agreement with Robbie on, is the need for government transparency. People should have privacy. People should have freedom. Government should be accountable. Government should be transparent. And somehow we've gotten that all backwards. The number of things the ways in which government demands to know everything about us. But the idea that the people who should serve the public have anything that they get to hide from the people who elect them is abhorrent in my view and in Western civilization.
Yeah, can I just ask you, Paul, just imagine this scenario. We've got these $7 billion and $10 billion data centers, and they're all being built. And take Victoria, for example. I'm going to paint the picture here. Bottle of champagne on the wall, cracks open the door. Jacinta Allen is there, Premier of Victoria. All the other premiers are very excited. They're all there too. Prime Minister is there. And so we're opening this brand new data centre. It's going to do this, 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 and this. And we have a power blackout.
Yeah.
Could you tell us what would happen then?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the thing. Like you say, everything is a trade-off. And so, if we don't build our energy capacity, if we don't build our nuclear, if we don't upgrade our coal, and as we know, wind and solar are unreliable. They have wind droughts for wind. Like for instance, Spain just this last year, they celebrated their first day with 100% complete renewable energy. And then next week they had a blackout. The week right after that, the Iberian Peninsula effectively went dark, except it was during the day. So, but these things, they're known problems. Germany is openly regretting turning off their nuclear power. So, and then if you wanted kind of an even scarier situation, if you follow things like solar weather at all, if a Carrington event, solar storm happened today, we would also be in the dark. If we're going to prioritize, like adults, our risks, one of the first things that we should do is harden our grid against solar storms. We should increase our capacity. We should make sure we have stable baseload power and not drain our reliability and our costs on fads like data centers before the grid's ready for them.
Let's see that Bill Gates is visiting Australia. I don't know if he's still here, but he was here yesterday. Do you think he'd be talking, this is to Robbie, this one, do you think he'd be talking about data centers or Russian girlfriends?
Is he flying here on Epstein's used jet?
No, not at all.
Oh, poor Bill. Look, it's really gone downhill for that guy. But we have to acknowledge that on this particular subject, he's actually advocating something that we would be in agreement with, which is, I believe, Paul would probably know better than me, but reopening 3 Mile Island to use nuclear power for data centers, because and so I'm hoping that's what he talks to Albanese about, right? Just cut through the spin and say that's the only way you can do it, right? Obviously, Microsoft is a huge player in AI and where they intended to go. And just by his actions, which is more powerful than words, it's an acknowledgement that this is a problem solver if we want to go down this direction. I just don't, I'm very pessimistic about the way political debates are waged in Australia. Also the role of the media, which is incredibly frustrating because, the journalists who get to shape public opinion, even if they're well-intentioned, are obviously sorely lacking in basic knowledge when it comes to reporting on these subjects. And so it's virtually never done justice in the media. And when you're involved in electoral politics, you really do take seriously the assessment that 20% of Australians are interested in politics, but the outcome is determined by the 80% who aren't. And so the messaging that is absorbed by that 80% is always really superficial. And if you had and so the role of the media is very, very important. And it's still, in my view, it's still more important than social media, to be honest. People will see stuff on social media, but they won't give it as much credibility unless it's repeated on the media. I'm sure that's changing. It's changing with the youth generation coming through, but it's not changing. It hasn't changed enough. And so, Albanese and co will continue to skate by and just say, renewable, and Chris Bowen, right? Renewables are the cheapest form of energy. So that's all we have to say to justify our policy. But then you got an interesting character as the Premier of South Australia, Peter Malinauskas, who has come out, quite pro-nuclear, and maybe the visit of Bill Gates will reinforce his hand, and we might actually get some more thought on this in government for the remainder of its term. Anyway, I don't know how long it's going to be there for.
If I can come in on the back of that real quick, is that all right? So, just like you say, there are certain lies, certain misstatements that are so ridiculous they can only be held up by complicit media. This idea that for instance, we go towards this renewable energy, so-called renewable energy, to help the world, but China is building 100 coal power plants just last year. And we're shipping twice the amount of coal we need to produce all our electricity off to Asia to be burnt, to be put into the same atmosphere that it goes to anyway. And then we import unreliable energy from Asia. Again, making us less resilient and making our power grid uncertain. So, I mean, it's one of those things that if it was just said once in the mainstream media, it would be obvious that it's a grift. It would be obvious that it's not for our own good. And only the complicit media, gatekeeping narrative machine that we call the media, allows things like that to stand. It's I don't know what to say about it.
Well, can I, just my comeback on that as well. Only not to rebut you, Paul, at all, but only because Donald Trump has said something recently that can be misunderstood because he's dead wrong. So you're right. China is building a lot of new coal-fired power plants, but where Donald Trump is wrong, I was there. They're building a lot of solar panels and windmills as well. Essentially, the way to understand China is it's doing the most of everything. It's building the most nuclear capacity. It's building the most coal capacity. It's building the most solar capacity. It's building the most wind capacity. And there are specific reasons why it does it. One of the attractions with renewables, so-called, in China is, or a couple, but one of them is the very serious pollution problem that it had to get on top of, and so it's attracted by that, and electric cars and that sort of things to deal with real pollution, right? Not hung up on. I mean, they'll talk about carbon pollution, but the motivation is real pollution. But otherwise, it's all about meeting the need, and the need is energy, and they will do whatever they have to. So I've read about solar farms being laid out in China next to remote villages because it's easier to put the solar farm there than it is to roll out the very long transmission lines, right? But they won't cover valuable farmland with the solar. They'll put it on a rocky mountainside, and then what ends up happening is it's virtually desert. But then the effect of the solar panels will be an accumulation of moisture. Grass starts growing under these things, and then they let in goats and things in there to keep the grass down, right? And it becomes like a win-win kind of situation. So they do that kind of thing, but they're not taking away precious farmland to put solar panels down, because it's all about solving problems, not making problems. Whereas we're driven by fads and manias, and all we end up doing is making problems, and we're not solving the fundamental one, which is this energy need.
Yeah, Paul, do you you're highly credentialed, ex-NASA, aerospace, avionics, and a nuclear engineer. I'm just wondering if you get a headache when you bash your head on the table every day and you read or hear what we're doing, and you see our politicians. I mean, it's a bit sad. How do you think the Americans would react to what we're doing in this country? Or actually, how do you think the world would react to what we're doing?
Yeah, it's really hard to watch. I am originally American. I've visited 50 countries. Australia was the first place I ever came to that felt like home, and I moved here. I think it's an amazing culture, an amazing place. I love the natural beauty. I love the culture. I think Australians should appreciate a lot of them do actually appreciate their place, but also their culture, which is really quite amazing. I moved here for a reason. Americans tend to love Australians. Australians that go to visit the United States will almost always find a very warm welcome. But it is hard for me as an American to see what we're doing to ourselves. In our rural environment, our farms, and our way of life when these self-inflicted wounds, particularly in energy, occur. And a lot of things. Energy is the anchor resource for so many other things. It becomes an input cost for almost everything you do. So that makes energy our mistakes there particularly painful.
Yeah, I find that because I lived a great chunk of my life in the US, and I find that the mindset, I always had trouble coming back because it was a different mindset. Here it was that, don't ship uranium, ship uranium, don't use it. Do the same with coal, don't use it. Put up windmills. In fact, under Chris Bowen, who would have to be the most ridiculous politician I've ever seen in my life, and the idea is he's going to save the environment by bulldozing most of the Great Dividing Range, and around Townsville they're putting up thousands upon thousands of turbines, but in doing so they're going to raise the top of the Great Dividing Range, 400 metres either side of the turbine. The koalas go a bit spastic. Sorry, I should not say that. Go nuts, but it's terrible. The whole thing is just it's a contradiction in itself. And then you get back to these data centres and the water. When we haven't got enough. You can't have these 1,000 diesel plants around the place, and the water you can't reuse it again because it's just unusable. So big question. If we have problems with energy and water, and even though they're beating their chest that we're building these great data centers and stuff, do you think this is just going to be a fad at the end of the day and it will never ever happen to a great degree?
Certain things make sense in certain places. There's a reason why Iceland has a competitive advantage in smelting aluminium, is because they have abundant geothermal energy, an absolute excess of it, which you can't normally transport to other places. But what you can use it for is smelting aluminium. Sorry, so you have. You have certain. The Nordic countries have an abundance of water. They have no trouble keeping their data centers cool, and they have a fair bit of geothermal or hydropower. That has an ideal environment for that kind of job. Australia, none of those things apply. So it's a self-inflicted wound. It's an own goal. Ones that I'm sure that the politicians have some business relationships that their campaigns will make money, allegedly. When some of these things occur, because the renewable subsidies also there's a circular flow of funding that's often not transparent. But is it going to be good for the Australian people? No, it's not.
No, I think it's going to be a terrible burden on this country. And Robbie, you probably have to agree too that if we don't think about these things properly, step by step, like building a house, make sure you got the block of land first, to make sure it's got electricity, and make sure you got that and this and that. If we don't do this properly, one, it will just implode, or if not, you'll have communities destroyed in the country in a shocking state. The fear is, though, that we'll be left behind.
Well, are we even clear, though, on what the future will look like in terms of the real need for AI that's driving this? I mean, I'm sure AI will be in the future, but and I know there's an application for it now, and good on it for the people that are applying it. But is that what's really driving this massive investment in data centers, or is it just pure speculation? And in which case, governments should be saying, well, no, we don't want to permanently disrupt our economy for this kind of thing. That's my difficulty, because that's the part where as I said, we've seen it before. I remember the .com bubble very well, and you had a similar thing there. It wasn't as intensive as things like data centers, but I remember there was an American company called Global Crossing, that went bankrupt in 2001, and I think it had rolled out, enough fiber optic cable to go around the world, 500 times, and it was some ridiculous figure, right? Uh, and this was all driven by, this is where the world's going. Now, the world's probably caught up to that by now, right, over time, but at that time it was purely just a bubble, and the whole thing came crashing down. And I think we've set ourselves up for a much bigger one with much bigger consequences, but it's going to leave a scar on the landscape after it's happened.
Okay, just as we are wrapping up now, and I'll stay with you at the moment, Robbie, just imagine you're Merlin, long white beard, you're looking into your crystal ball, a couple of whiskies. What do you see for the future for Australia if we keep going along this present journey?
Well, we're going to run into severe energy problems. We've got severe energy problems now, every day, in the form of what we pay for energy. Yep. That is a severe problem. It's a debilitating problem. It's the biggest fundamental problem in the economy, and I would say it's the second biggest sort of social problem, in a sense, after just this terrible housing crisis that we've got in this country. But energy, the energy component of that is huge as well, right? This has to be addressed, and instead, the government is doubling down on making it worse. And then because they tried to cheat last year, and they put on a rebate for energy prices to make inflation look like it was coming down, and then it snapped back. Now people like me are going to face, tomorrow we're going to get an interest rate rise, right, on our housing loans, on debt that's way too big because of the cost of housing, right? All because we have a government that refuses to actually address the problem. And so it has to reach a breaking point. I can't not see it reaching a breaking point. And at that point, Albanese will become an ex-prime minister, and he'll always trade on being an ex-prime minister, and he'll get probably appointed to a few shindigs overseas as an ex-prime minister, right? And get on that circuit. But the damage has been fundamentally done in his economy. And it's going to take a political shift. We're seeing political upheavals in Australia now. Maybe that'll start to bring some different thinking on board, right? You see One Nation in the polls. Well, if you're not familiar with One Nation, I mean, I know Malcolm Roberts pretty well. We probably all do, I suspect. There's people in One Nation I know that are big thinkers on this subject. So, and they've been ridiculed for a long time, but now they are riding high in the polls, and it's going to change the balance. Will that allow a better debate? There are people on the Labor side that are just stifled at the moment that would like to have this debate as well, right? But they're overwhelmed by the political correctness of their party. Will this new political upheaval change that balance? Let's hope.
Paul, final thoughts?
You used to have a sign in the workplace said, "Beatings will continue until morale improves." And in this case, the crises will continue until awakening occurs, and then hopefully the Aussie population will rise up from their slumber and bring this ship around.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Robbie Barwick, Paul Vallejo.
Thank you.
I just want to put a knife in my head, but I won't. Vallejo, thank you. And also Ross Johns, who was here, but we've just got a report from the police that he was eaten by a crocodile. So we're going very well. He's just nicked off to a barbecue, which I probably would have done too. Gentlemen, Paul and Robbie, thank you so much for your time. This has been The Protagonists, and this is The World Today.